So it's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Lori Smetanka. She's going to come and talk to you about the work of the National Consumer Voice, advocates, and also express some of the information from the residents' perspective.
Thanks so much, Kelly, and thanks for having me here today. I think the previous speakers from this morning have really done a good job of laying out the problems of antipsychotic drugs being given to individuals, particularly with dementia, for whom there's not a corresponding diagnosis and for whom they are, as you've heard, very dangerous. But it's not a new problem. It's not something that we're just hearing about. This is an issue that dates back decades. As I was looking back and doing research, I know you're not going to believe this, but I've been doing this work for 25 years. I know, you're not going to believe it, but it's something that we were talking about when I first started at the Consumer Voice, which was called NCNR at the time. Hearings were held in Congress in the 70s and 80s with references to chemical straitjackets, drug abuse in nursing homes that all dealt with medications that were being used to sedate and quiet people, that looked at questioning the use of psychotropic drugs and whether adequate monitoring of the use of these drugs exists. And so, this is something that we are continuing to need to work on. And why does it continue? We've heard some of the systematic issues that were addressed by Bethany this morning. Not enough staff in long-term care facilities that are providing care, inadequate training for those that are there. They don't know how to manage people with dementia and to provide care for them adequately. Lack of adequate oversight by the state and federal entities that are charged with monitoring long-term care facilities and protecting the residents. Those are just to name a few. So advocacy is really important around this issue, and a lot of us have been working on it for decades. As Kelly mentioned, there's a small but mighty team of us that includes Toby and Dara and Janet and other organizations like AARP Foundation with Kelly and Iris that have been continuing to work on these issues systemically, working with our partners, the long-term care ombudsmen, citizen advocates across the country, and others interested in promoting care. Many of you have been a part of these discussions and this work that's being done. And we also know, as has been shared by Dr. Evans this morning, that there are better ways to provide care. And we often talk about like alternative treatments. Well, as Dr. Evans said, this isn't a treatment for people with dementia, but there are better ways to provide care for individuals that need it. And there are frameworks in place to provide the better care, focusing on timely and adequate assessment of the person's needs, trying to get to the actual underlying cause of any distress or agitation that's being exhibited by the individual. And I'm going to have to remember to change my terminology from agitation to other terms that have a different connotation. The requirements for individualized care that are based on the residents' needs and preferences are long-standing tenets contained in federal law, and so too are the requirements for ongoing assessment, for care planning, tailored for each individual. That was a hallmark of the nursing home reform law, that each individual would have their needs met and their preferences identified and honored. As an aside, it's really not like the information on how to provide good care doesn't exist. There are a lot of resources, training materials, guides that do actually show how to provide good care. We know how to do it. It just needs to be done. So the work that all of us are doing, the team at the AARP Foundation Litigation, Dr. Evans, Toby and Janet, and those of us, we have been working for a long time on trying to raise awareness about the problems associated with the inappropriate prescribing of these drugs, as well as for changing the behavior at the facility and physician level, through the courts, and in the policy arena by impacting how the federal government and the state governments are responding to these issues. But we need to really be doing more to engage and empower residents and families, and as Kelly mentioned earlier, by raising their expectations, by changing the culture about what quality care looks like and what to do if it's not being provided. really changing the culture of providing care so that when a resident with dementia, and frankly even those without, because we know that these drugs are being given to people even if they don't have a diagnosis of dementia, as the first story that was in, I think Bethany talked about it, where they were trying to hide the medication in her applesauce. When an individual is uncooperative, distressed, challenging, or whatever term it is that we want to use, and I'm going to tell you, flat out, I'm going to be one of those people. I am going to be uncooperative. It's a bad trait that I have, but I know that I'm going to be one of those people, and they're going to be trying to give me those drugs too. So that whenever we have an individual who is exhibiting those behaviors, that the response is to engage in comfort care, in person-centered, individualized care, to identify what it is that they need and are trying to communicate to us, and not try to silence them by giving them these harmful medications. Part of the advocacy process, as I mentioned, includes equipping and empowering ombudsmen, citizen advocates, and family members to secure appropriate care and treatment for residents with dementia. So we already know that the engagement of the long-term care ombudsman and citizen advocates at both the state and the national level makes a tremendous difference in policy change. Ombudsmen, through their mandate under the Older Americans Act, advocate at both the individual level. That's on behalf of the individuals actually living in long-term care facilities and nursing homes and assisted living, as well as at the systemic level, which includes facility-wide advocacy, or with the state or federal agency, or even with legislatures to impact policies that'll make a difference for all residents. Individually, they are providing assistance directly when they've received a complaint, when they've observed issues in a long-term care facility. They work directly with the residents, with their family members, who need assistance. But they can't do everything. There are 53 state ombudsmen across the country. There are less than 1,200 paid staff. They are a very heavily volunteer-based entity, which is terrific. They are in facilities more than almost any other program that exists right now, but they can't be everywhere at once, and so they need the assistance of not only citizen advocates, but residents and families themselves. The Ombudsman is an important resource in getting information directly to residents and family members, and they help empower them to advocate for themselves individually as well as through resident and family councils. Having a regular presence in long-term care facilities gives ombudsmen a direct view into what's actually happening in that facility, and it gives them a view into the challenges that exist there. And that knowledge then helps inform them not only in their individual advocacy, but also in their systemic advocacy, which could include advocating for stronger laws or rules. It could include advocating for informed consent legislation, participating in statewide efforts to reduce the use of antipsychotic medications. It could also include advocating for facility-based changes. Ombudsmen and citizen advocates and groups at the national and state level have been really important at keeping this issue in front of states, in front of the federal government, in front of CMS, and in providing leadership needed to reduce the use of these drugs across the country. There are a number of ombudsman programs that actually have taken that leadership role in state initiatives to help reduce the use of restraints. We've seen that in California, we've seen it in Maine, and they've helped make differences. They've participated side by side with us as we talk to CMS about why is it that these drugs are still being given and what needs to be done to affect policy change. But we need to be changing expectations also about the delivery of care. We need to also focus on equipping the individuals who receive the care and their family and friends with the information, the resources, and the strategies necessary to empower self-advocacy. We want to raise their awareness about the dangers of psychotropic medications for people with dementia, to raise their expectations about what good care looks like, to help them demand that their rights and preferences be respected. We can give them the information about the risks and benefits of care options and treatments, and help them know what questions to ask as they make decisions about accepting and refusing treatments. It literally is the residents and their families. And I just want to make a note that in terms of defining family, it's whoever the resident says is their family. Not just their immediate family, but whoever the resident says their family is. That they're facing these issues every hour of every day, and they need to be empowered to advocate for themselves, and they need to be equipped with reliable information. Only then can we change the conversation about what to expect from care in a long-term care facility. So let's talk about what some of the things are that the families need to know. First of all, they need to know their rights. People don't know what their rights are, or even if they are aware that they have rights, they don't know how to exercise them. We in the Consumer Voice's office receive calls and emails daily from residents and family members who aren't aware of what their rights are. They're not aware, for example, that the federal law requires that nursing homes provide quality care so that each resident will attain or maintain their highest level of functioning. That nursing homes are required to enhance each individual's quality of life and treat them with dignity and respect. That nursing homes must honor freedom of choice in care and treatment decisions, which means that residents or their representatives should be able to provide informed consent or refusal for any proposed treatment. They don't know that long-term care facilities are required to provide individualized care based on a thorough evaluation and care plan developed with the participation of the resident and his or her representative, and that residents and their representatives have a right to a prompt response from the facility to any complaints or grievances. Residents and their families also need to know about dementia, about other conditions that they're facing, that the individual's living with, and about these drugs that are being prescribed for them. They need to understand the progression and symptoms of dementia, what to expect, and what good care strategies are. We often hear family members asking staff or physicians to give their mother or father something to help him or her calm down. They don't like to see their family member in distress. They don't like to see them agitated, or whatever word we're going to be using. They hear from others about how difficult their family member is or how uncooperative they are. Many family members don't want to rock the boat or cause problems themselves. But all too often, as we've heard already today, they don't understand either enough about their condition that their parent is facing or their loved one is facing, or that the behavior is a form of communication that may need to be interpreted. They don't know that treatment strategies may be available, like music or massage, or offering pain medicine, or snacks or drinks, which might get at the cause of the agitated behavior. And they don't know the dangers of these medications for people with dementia. It's also important that we educate family members about these drugs and also equip them with the questions to ask, including questions about the medications that are being ordered and given by staff. What are they for? How long are they going to be given? The risks, the side effects, what other options are available, and what other treatments have been tried already. They need to know how to identify the medications that are being prescribed. Is it a pill? What color is it? How big is it? When are they supposed to get it during the day? What do you do if there's a medication that you don't recognize in your pile of medications? Again, like the woman that Bethany talked about this morning, when they're trying to be snuck in. Just last week, I was on a call with residents where 2 of the residents on our small group talked about medication errors that they had received within the 2 weeks prior, and the challenges that they had to face in advocating for themselves in their facility. Other questions include what other approaches have been tried before this drug is being prescribed, and to ask about the care plan. Is it being followed? If it's not being followed, why? And what changes can or should be happening? Because we know these drugs are commonly given without advanced knowledge or consent, families need to be educated about the effects these drugs can have when used. If their family member has been alert, able to walk, able to speak, and begins losing these abilities, or if there's a change in behavior, they need to know to ask questions of the staff, of the physician, why? What's been happening with my loved one? Too often the drugs are being given without appropriate care strategies, without informed consent, without being told about the risks, without a plan for monitoring the use of the medication, and without a plan for decreasing and stopping its use. In addition to being informed, residents and families need to feel empowered to ask questions and about the treatments being given. They have the right to be informed about the care being provided, to know why it's being provided, how long it will be provided for, what else or what other options might be available, when will those options be reviewed again, and they have the right to refuse treatments that they don't want to participate in. Recently, CMS revised the nursing home requirements of participation, and they're slowly being implemented. And those rules reinforce some of the rights that we've been talking about today, providing greater emphasis on person-centered care. They also require facilities to include plans or processes for the implementation of PRN or as-needed medications, the antipsychotic medications, for reviewing whether the drug's being used and for stopping the drug. Unfortunately, that's one of the provisions that there's not enforcement happening on right now because of pressure from the nursing home industry. In addition to feeling empowered to ask questions about care, families are an important resource for staff. Since generally they're the ones that know the resident best, they can share information with staff about how to learn about the individual better, learn what the behaviors might mean, learn about what their past life was like, their past schedules were like, if they worked during the middle of the day and slept at night, or vice versa, worked all night and slept during the day, if they like to eat dinner at 4 in the afternoon, whatever it is, families are a really good source of information for how to provide better care for that individual. And they can also provide information about how to be successful in soothing the individual in the past. So we need to help families not only understand what it is they need to know about providing care and being a resource, but also where to go for help, how to find their ombudsman or a citizen group in their area, how to contact the licensing agency, and how to file a complaint if necessary. So those are the things that our organization and those that we're partnering with are promoting.